Hello, everyone. First off, I want to say thank you to Daltridge Sales for having myself in to do a presentation for Wyka Instruments regarding their food and pharma sanitary devices that we have in the market. My name is Clay Treadway. I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been in the sanitary industry now for about 9 years. I've been with Wyka for around 3 years, or 2 years, I'm sorry, about 2 years now. I transitioned fully into the food and pharma market about a year ago now. And so with that, a little basis of Wyka and the food and pharma market. Wyka has been in the food and pharmaceutical life science market for about 12 years now. Most of this was done over in Europe. As you'll see as I go through a lot of these products, I'll discuss how they came about and a little bit about the European philosophy of why we did some of what we did. With that, we have been in the U.S. market now going on about 4 years. What we did was a group was started 4 years ago. There's 5 of us. There's myself in the Southeast. I have a Northeast counterpart. We have an inside product specialist who's out of our Lawrenceville, Georgia office. Then we have a market segment manager who oversees the whole group. And then we have a global business development vice president who covers basically large accounts that are globally and helping to get us project opportunities and things. So with that, let's go ahead and get started now. I don't know, basically the way I'm going to do this is we're going to go through kind of a good, better, and best method with the Wyka product. A little intro to what we're going to talk about here. Wyka, the reason we developed some of these products that you'll see, some of them are very typical things that come to the market. Some of them are things that we've developed to help solve issues that customers have in their facilities. And some of these I'll point out the specific things as we go, but basically just a little background here. There is this there's 2 main governing groups in the food and pharma accounts. There's 3A and there's a group called the ASME BPE. 3A is mainly dealing with your dairy, food, things of that nature, and is mainly just a U.S. style governing group. The other group, this ASME BPE, is a group that is global basically, and they have put together standards, let's say, because it's not written law that you have to do any of this stuff the way they ask, but they give you things that if you do follow them, then you are ensured a lot better chance of not getting in any sort of regulation trouble or anything. So what they did is there was a study done a few years ago where they went in, they figured out what were the 3 most highest areas of contamination in a facility. When I say contamination, that's where bacteria or something like that can grow in a facility due to not being able to clean it. That's one thing that you will learn working in this industry, as I've told people being in it now, but I almost say that it's more important how well you clean something than how well the process even works in these industries. Cleaning is of the utmost importance. So what they did was with this, Wyka was able to come up with basically 2 out of the 3 things Wyka has solutions for, and that's some of the stuff I'll show you. But just briefly, the 2 things that Wyka was able to come up with ideas to help with, and we'll talk about these as we go along, but number one of the hardest areas to clean in a facility is a T, and I'm sure that most people are familiar with this some way or another. This is the one I carry in my case. It's just a small plastic one. Typically, you're going to have a stainless steel one in a facility. They cannot clean properly no matter how many times the upper leg, which is this portion right here of a T. There's always going to be some sort of contamination that is still in that. So that's the number 1. Number 2 that Wyka did was a tri-clamp fitting. And what you'll learn is that's very common in this industry is a tri-clamp fitting. Because what happens is when you tri-clamp something on, due to this gasket, when people tri-clamp these on and they push the gasket, that gasket ends up pushing into either the process or into basically into the tri-clamp, because you've always got a gentleman that uses a screwdriver or something to try to tighten it too hard. And so that then in turn will cause contamination, because this gasket then gets protruding into your process and can start deteriorating and things and cause contamination. So that's the two main reasons with how WICA has come up with some things to help with that. One thing before we get much farther, if you have questions about the product, which I'm going to start on now, please, if it's specific to a product, go ahead and ask it. If it's something that's just overall you'd like to maybe know, if you'd like to wait to the end, that's fine as well. So with that, as we go, we're going to talk about things to solve those issues. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So what WICA did, first off, we're going to talk about pressure. Okay. Please ask your questions in the live chat. So what WICA did, this is WICA's basic pressure gauge. And I'm sure we're all familiar with what a pressure gauge is, so we're not going to go into that. But in my good, better, and best thing, this is the basic pressure gauge. You're going to see these in every single facility. Okay? Your standard diaphragm pressure gauge. Here's your diaphragm. And it's then got your standard fill fluid that's going to be in that board-on tube, as we're all aware. And so with that, you know, as you push on the diaphragm, it's going to make the pressure gauge read. As you can see, the needle moving. Unfortunately, mine's been pushed so many times it hardly moves anymore. But as you can see, that's the way a pressure gauge works. So this is our standard gauge that we would sell up against any of our competition. And what's special about WICA's, just a brief thing that you don't know, WICA uses, first off, complete stainless steel internals of their basic gauge. And that's actually not the norm in the industry. A lot of people still use brass internals. That is extremely, if you would have something happen, that's not a good thing in the sanitary industry, to have those brass internals and have a opportunity for product, if your diaphragm would get damaged, to get to those internals. So that's one of the great selling features of WICA's basic M93X.3A gauge. Number one, it's got all stainless steel internals. Number two, what we have is we use a smaller board-on tube than typically what the competition would use. Basically, in our 4-inch and 2.5-inch gauge, we use the same 2.5-inch board-on tube. And we're still able to keep the same accuracy level for that. So again, another selling feature. You've got less fill fluid in that board-on tube. So one of the things you're going to learn as we go through this, fill fluid getting into product, although FDA approved, is still heavily frowned upon in this industry. So that's good. This is a very good gauge. As I said, it's got some great selling features to it. Can go in about anything, food, pharmaceutical, brewery, any sort of sanitary industry. This gauge can be used and will be used in the process. We also, what we did, WICA has what they have their N93.25. Now, what this is special, is it's got a 3/4 inch tri-clamp. A lot of times when you get to your pharmaceutical style plants, they'll more get into some very small process piping and things, and that's where this style gauge with your plants of that nature comes really in handy. So this gauge, again, you're going to see opportunity quite a bit in pharmaceutical. One of the unique things about this gauge is that what we can do to it, so we can actually add this to it, which is called a cooling tower. Okay, with this cooling tower, what happens is it basically works the same as a heat exchanger. So it takes away the heat. So this is a great application if you're in a client and they have steam lines, things like that, to look at using this cooling tower. That can be put on all sorts of different gauges, but it also comes on this one as well. So what that does is We actually have calculations for it in our engineering department, depending on the temperature drop you would like. But, you know, again, this is a great device to go into pharmaceutical plants if you have some of those in your area. So that gets through basically some of WICA's basic process gauges for the food and pharma industry. Now, when I go, that's good. Now we're going to go to what's better. So what WICA did is we, a few years ago, went to customers and said, what could we do that would make it better than just your standard gauge? Well, they ended up saying if you could make a gauge that had no fill fluid in it, that would extremely help out. So what we came up with is this is what we call our dry cell gauge. Now, if you can see here, if I can get up to the camera a little bit, the way this gauge works is there is basically a rod that sits on your diaphragm right here. And when that rod is pushed by the diaphragm, it makes the gauge work. So there is no liquid inside of that internal pieces in there. What that is essentially, when I explain it to someone without a sample, it's similar to the way kind of an old-timey watch would work, the internals of it. But what's great about this device is you have completely taken away the possibility of contamination with this device. Because if that diaphragm is ruptured, then they have no worry that any fill fluid is going to get in their product. Plus, again, everything's stainless steel internals. So again, no brass to get into or anything. And as that also, when this gauge, the diaphragm is ruptured, it immediately is going to go to reading 0 and stay at 0. So that's a great thing because you have an immediate visualization that that gauge is not working and that you need to change it. One thing I did not mention about our standard gauges is that when you do have a diaphragm failure and you lose that fill fluid, the gauge is going to continue to work because your process is going to go back into that board-on tube. So your gauge is still going to have fluid in it that's making it work. So there is no indication to you that this gauge ever quits working. So again, that's a benefit that makes this better. Is that with this, the second that the diaphragm fails, the gauge is going to start reading 0. Now what we did with this as well is we said, okay, so we can make a standard gauge like this. What else could we do to make it better for you? They said, what if you could look possibly at making a compact gauge similar to that? Well, we did. We made a dry cell compact gauge.
I don't know what that means. If you like.
So with a dry cell compact gauge, basically this is a back mount gauge, tri-clamp fitting. This gauge works the same as the one I just showed you. It's all dry cell. As you push on the back diaphragm, it makes the gauge work. And if this would fail for some reason, you're going to see fill fluid in it, and it's going to read 0. Or you're not going to see fill fluid, you're going to see product in it, and it's going to read 0. So again, you immediately have a visualization of this. These two gauges, really, where you're going to see the dry cell benefit you is going to be in your pharmaceutical, probably plants. Some food plants are getting more stringent about the risk of having contamination from fill fluid, so it's always something good to talk about, but it's not such a stringent thing right now as it would be so in pharmaceutical. Another thing with all these things I'm going to show you, you'll see typically are going to have 3A on them because they're all 3A approved. They're all E-Hedge approved as well, which if you're not familiar with that, that's basically a European similar equivalent of 3A, which says that this device is completely cleanable. It's just a European thing of it. So those are you're going to see that as well. One other unique thing about this compact one is it can be autoclaved. Really, that you're only going to want to talk about that if you're in a pharmaceutical facility. But what autoclaving is, just a brief explanation, is it's basically where they take and they can put a device in a high pressure system that's going to essentially kill any bacteria or anything on it. So these devices have to be able to be extremely airtight. And as you can see, if you could touch this thing, the glass and everything is very tight on it, very thick, it cannot break or bust. So again, that's a great device for possibly portable tanks, things like that, in the, again, pharmaceutical industry. Staying with on the better avenue, the next thing that we have that's very unique for essentially a basic pressure gauge is what I like to call our inline diaphragm seal. So what this is when your standard diaphragm is something sort of like this, as you know, what we've done with this is the diaphragm seal is the complete inner portion of this thing. This is like basically this would go into a T and tri-clamp in. What you do then is you take a typical gauge and it screws into the top. That's just an MPT fitting, whatever size you would like. And so what this is if you could touch it, basically there's a slight diaphragm right here with a film that's what's reading your pressure, and then it pushes up into this. So again, where does this get better, you ask? Well, number one, you've eliminated the T, which we talked about earlier is a place of contamination. So but you still have your tri-clamps, but you've eliminated a T, which is a huge issue. So this is a great device. Can be used in about anything. Really good, I'll tell you, if you have food accounts and stuff that possibly have particulates, like we've seen it, things such as salsa facilities, things like where they make spaghetti sauce, anything like that that may have some type of particulate. This is great because it allows complete flow through. This device can go anywhere from a 3/4 inch up to, I want to say 3 inches, I think. It is pretty much the standard that can come. So you have a pretty wide range of availability with that. So that kind of starts getting you, that's your good, you're better. Now we're going to look a little bit at the best and then talk a little bit about our pressure transmitters. So with the best is really, you're going to see it in possibly two industries, and that's aseptic food industry or possibly dairy when you have those, or the pharmaceutical, really, because this is your top of the line device for being able to tell if you would have a diaphragm rupture or any sort of contamination. So what this is as you can see, you have your standard diaphragm down here. This is called a DMS system, diaphragm monitoring system. So what we've got here is we've got our diaphragm. This is a monitor right here, and this is just a basic pressure transmitter. Now with this, we can do it with a standard gauge or whatever, so it could have the monitor and just a gauge. But for the purposes of this, I have this one here. So way this thing works is we're mainly just going to focus on this area down here. So this is what that area down here is. And what this is this is the diaphragm monitoring system, the thing that makes it work. So what we've done here is with this, we have two diaphragms, as you can see right there, hopefully. Two diaphragms right there. What we've done with this is we've taken and we pull a vacuum between these two diaphragms. Okay? It's going to come out of this. That's again going to be similar to this. So you've pulled your vacuum out. Your vacuum is what's reading on this monitor right here. So with that, as your vacuum's reading on this monitor right here, when and if you would lose that vacuum, meaning that your diaphragm has failed, if one of these diaphragms fail, which typically it's always going to be your process side diaphragm, which is the lower one, then what's going to happen is you're going to lose that vacuum, and it's immediately going to take this gauge from green to red, indicating that you have lost your vacuum in this. Now, these can come also with a signal. Uniqueness about this one is that we have the signal integratedly wired up through the process head. So what that does is having an integrated wiring, it allows you to put this into a previous application. We also have it where it's not integrated wired, It'll just have a secondary wire. That's great for new applications if you're working on a new facility or something of that nature. Now, again, part of the reason I say why just really an aseptic and pharmaceutical, obviously, as you can tell, this device is a little bit larger. It's got a few more bells and whistles, as you may say. So this device is typically going to cost you more than one of these. So it's the value there. You know, where you're going to put it where you absolutely have to know that you cannot have contamination. A lot of pharmaceutical plants are using this typically on their final fill areas and things of that nature. Aseptic can be anywhere in the aseptic process, but again, it's one of the only gauges that can assure that it's a patented device, and it can ensure and tell you if you have a diaphragm failure, so that you don't have product get contaminated with fill fluid or possibly the air. The other nice thing about this is, like I said, when you have that lower diaphragm fail, you've still got your secondary upper diaphragm, which is continuing to hold your fill fluid in it. So let's just say, for example, if you're running your process and this thing would go off and indicate that you've had a failure, you could finish your process, come out, open this thing up, and look. And if you looked and saw, oh, well, down here, this diaphragm is the only one damaged, but I can see the other one's still intact, then you know that your process has been able to be kept clean, I guess, for a better lack of a word, so that then you don't have to quarantine or anything of that nature. And just an idea, in a pharmaceutical plant, the cost of having possibly fill fluid from a gauge like this, if the diaphragm ruptures, the cost to just deal with it through the FDA is typically going to be somewhere around $1 million to handle the whole entire thing. So it's costly process to work through. So ultimately, this is not, a lot of plants don't have an issue spending this kind of money to have the detection, be able to know what happens. Next up, Leica does have some transmitters, more basic transmitters. This is one of our, this is just a switch, but it has the ability to have two different switches. But what's very unique about this one compared to competitions is you can actually twist both the top head on it, and you can twist the middle portion of it, which allow you a 360. So if you put this thing on this way, but you need to see it that way, you can take it and twist it so that you can still see it and read it. Also, it has the ability, if it's flipped upside down, all numbers on it flip to be able to be read. So this is just a basic pressure switch. We also can do this in a temperature switch as well. We also have very basic pressure transmitters. If you have somewhere that doesn't need, say, your system logics, I guess you would say, like field bus, heart, protocol, something of that nature, you could just have a 4 to 20 hookup on this that goes in. This is a great little transmitter to go up against anything in, say, food, beverage, pharmaceutical even, where they don't need to have the logic in the head. They can just have a transmitter that's sending something back to a PLC. Then we go to this one again, which again, this is what we call our UPT-20. Now this allows you, we're not again talking about the diaphragm monitoring system on this, we're just talking about the portion up here. This has the ability to be able to have heart, field bus, any of those installed into it, okay? So this will go up against your higher end transmitters in the industry. You'll see some higher end transmitters when it comes to food and beverage. Mostly you're going to see those in pharmaceutical and that style industry, pharmaceutical life sciences. So that kind of gives us a little basis of what all we have in the food and pharma side of things for pressure. So now we're going to move to temperature. So with temperature, we're going to start very basic here. We have all your standard bimetal thermometers that you can do. You know, these are, everyone's seen them. These are using chemical everything, but we also have them for the sanitary market. You know, we can do the thermo well with it as well. You know, where it's just a simple screw in, and then that's tri-clamped into the process on a T. So that would be your standard right there. We have all of those. But what we did is we went in and asked the customer, how can we help you with your RTD side of things? Well, and an RTD is a resistance thermometer, basically, the way it works. You're not going to see thermocouples typically in the food, pharma, life science industries. It's all going to be RTD. So what we did was we asked them, and they said, if you could give us something smaller, more compact, and you could give us something that was easier to be able to handle when we're calibrating it. So what we came up with first is this design. So what this is this is just a tri-clamp in RTD. That's the whole RTD right there. Comes out of the top with just a 4 to 20. Again, this design I'm going to show you first is great if you don't have to have the logic. You don't need to have the heart, field bus, any of that. You just want a 4 to 20 signal going back to a DCS system. So what this one is, it can be tri-clamped into the side of a tank. It can be tri-clamped into a T, whatever. You've got your 4 to 20. Then if you have to calibrate it, you have to untri-clamp it and calibrate it. Now, the downfall of this is once you untri-clamp it, take it out, you've again opened up your process. Not good. You'll learn in the food and pharma, the last thing you want to do is the least amount that you can open up your process, the better, especially pharmaceutical. So this still has its downfalls, although it is small and compact. Also a nice thing of this, they are intrinsically safe, as well as they can be autoclaved, which we talked about a little bit earlier. So the next design we came up with was we said, okay, so why don't we make something where they won't have to open up their system? So then we came up with this design, which what this is it's a spring-loaded RTD, just like this, just like that upper portion, 4 to 20 signal. And what we've done is it's removable from the thermo well, which is tri-clamped in. So that if you're standing out there, you don't have to open up your process. You just pull the RTD out. You can calibrate it on the spot, put it back in, and there you never opened up your process. With this also, as I said, it's spring loaded, so it constantly always has contact with that bottom portion, which is giving you the most accurate reading. These can be done anywhere from a 3/4 of an inch up to, I want to say, 4-inch tri-clamp. These can be done in size. So, these come again with a wide range. The really nice thing about these too is when you switch a customer or a customer goes to these, once they put these in, anything from that 3/4 inch to 4-inch size range all uses the exact same RTD size. All we do is adjust it in how the thermo well more or less sits in the tri-clamp, so that we can adjust that up. If you've got a very small line, we'll adjust it up for you. If it's a larger one, we'll be able to adjust it down. So this really makes it nice that you can have just one device sitting on your shelf. As the maintenance person, you're not going in searching around for the right RTD. You just go in and pick up one of these, bring it back out, put it back in your system, and it's ready to go. So these can all be programmed on site. It's a free program that you can download through WICA's website. All you have to purchase is the cord that goes to the top of it that can then go to your computer for reprogramming it. So a very unique little small device. Then what we said is okay, what if we could totally get rid of your T, even get rid of this part? Customer said we'd love that. So what we went to is this. What this is, now mind you, this is a very, very large one of it, and I'll show you a cutout here in a second of it. But this is a flow-through thermo well. So you would go into your customer, and you can have this as they would butt weld it, where you're totally getting rid of the tri-clamps, or we can have it where they can just go in and tri-clamp it in. But either way, what this does is you've totally gotten rid of that T, totally gotten rid of that opportunity for contamination. Similar again to going back to with pressure, your inline pressure, diaphragm pressure gauge. So this totally gets rid of that. Also, what we've done is to ensure cleanability of this, what we did, it's a little bit probably hard to see, but you can see how that's flattened a little bit. Well, what we've done here is that's pushed down into the process. So what it does is, because it constricts this, it actually increases the push of water, making it easier to clean it. Again, this has been E-Hedge and 3A approved, so it does have complete cleanability to it. This again goes the same way as I told you about this one. We have the capability, anything from 3/4 inch to a 4-inch line. This is actually a 3-inch. We'll all use the exact same RTD. So that's very, very nice in the plant, because now they're just down to 1 RTD. Again, 4 to 20 hookup, all of that. What we call these is we actually have a nomenclature name for them, I guess. You've got what we call the TR21A, TR21B, and then you've got your TR21C. So your C is the one that does not remove the RTD. A and B will be used together. One thing with the B, as we call it, or the flow through, what we did also was we came up with an angular design of this. So as you can see here, you've got your thermo well going into the side. Now, mind you, as I always like to tell people, one thing with this one is you have to install it this way. It doesn't work this way. You're just not going to be able to clean that area up in there. So it's got to be in this way. The great part with this one is, if you can see a little bit here, you can kind of see a little bit, maybe, I think you can barely see it, how the RTD is spring loaded up into that portion. So the other nice thing with this, if you know much about the industry and how most people make these, a typical OEM or end user, when they want to do something like this, they either have to put a tri-clamp on the end, and then they're forced with putting one of these on the end of it. Again, cleanability issues. Or they end up taking and just cutting a hole themselves and welding a thermo well in. Nice part with this, it's pre-made. It's already been tested. We know it has cleanability. So this is a very nice device. This is, as we call it, the TR21B with the flow through, TR21B with the angular. So they're the same device. Also with these, what came with them was, okay, so we gave the customer a very nice, easy, compact, but how then do we sell to a customer that needs the logic? Well, what we did then was we came up with what we call our TR22 series, which again has all the same nomenclatures as the other one. You have your TR22A, which is this one. It's got the ability to remove the bottom, just like we talked about a second ago. So you can take that bottom portion off, calibrate it, put it back in. Right there, never have to take that out of your line. We also have what we would call the TR22B, which unfortunately, as I've complained about a couple of times, I don't understand why we did it where it doesn't fit the sample, but it would work the same way as the one we just looked at. The great part with this one is you can actually see the cutout of how the inside is, where I told you how it's pushed down for cleanability reasons. So, but this would go in again. You've got your flow through. You can have it done with the angular as well, as we talked about. And then we also have it where we can have it in the C, which automatically has this locked on. Now, what makes Wyka's RTD with this logic in it better than, say, your competitors? We got a couple of different things. Number one, a nice part with ours, this union nut right here. A lot of our competitors, when you have to remove them for calibration, the maintenance staff has to go out and actually unwire the RTD every single time, take it out, because they don't have a union nut down here that they're able just to leave it in place. With ours, you can leave it wired up, just undo the union nut, pull the RTD out, put it back in, screw it back in. You never had to unwire it. So this makes it much more easier on the maintenance staff. Other nice thing about ours is the way we designed our head. A couple of things to it. Now, and when I say the logic, this is one right here where you've got the heart capability or whatever to talk into the DCS system. But what we did with ours was, to make it easier too, was we gave them, if you were able to look at this, our wiring here is a little bit angular, kinda, if you see that, shooting down. Reason of that is so when you put in the wire, and so many of these, if you've ever helped someone wire one or you've actually done it, when you put that wire in, it just shoves straight into that piece right there. You got to go in there with a little, needle nose pliers or something and try to pull all the wires out. The great part with this one is the way it's pushed, it actually shoots that wire up just right on top of it. So it makes it so much more user friendly because your wire kind of pops up right there on top of the where you've got to wire it in. The other part about compared to other ones, if you've ever seen them, very few companies, most of theirs sits like that. Ours sits like this, cleanability, so it'll wash off the top of it. So when they're in the system, they can clean off the top. So again, this kind of comes down to, this gives you the ability to have the logics if you can't just use a 4-to-20 hookup. I will say one thing, I think it's always good to question a facility because a lot of facilities continue to use this design but do not need it. All they need is this, a 4-to-20 hookup. So it's worth sometimes, going in, I guess, for a second question to just make sure, do you have to have the logics of this? Do you really need to keep it? Because a lot of facilities don't. They just need this, which is very nice. So we're moving along pretty well here, I think. So what we'll go into now is just a little bit of our level devices that we have. One of the things, let me first start with, is an optical level sensor. So if you see this, what this is, you can see that it's like a clear, almost diamond looking type thing. So what this is when installed, it's basically a switch. It's either yes or no. Where this is great is when you're looking at things such as if you want to maybe have this in a line and say you're got extremely expensive product, cosmetic industry, things of that nature, where they want to know that they've gotten out every last thing out of that process line. This is a great device because they can have it reading, saying yes, 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 no, and then they know they've cleaned it completely out. So this is basically an optical switch. Other thing, you can have it on a tank. You could have it as a high-low. You could have it where it triggers when it gets up to the top point, or you could have it down below where it triggers when it gets to a low point. Again, 4-to-20 can be autoclaved. A lot of our stuff, what we try to do is make it user-friendly on the end user. So that's a very unique, easy device. The next thing that we really get into some of our level with is the capability of basically magnetic level. That's really where WICA the market, I would say, that WICA produces their level for. We do have capabilities of doing, say, inches of water column, no question. So let's say a pressure transmitter. It would just, it's not something that WICA typically markets, but we do have that capability. So that would go up against, say, an Anderson, Anderson transmitter that goes in a silo or something for a dairy. We could do that with one of our transmitters, just measuring the inches of water column. What this is this actually there's a magnet in this ball, and there's actually a magnet inside of this rod. So what it's doing is we have three different designs, not multiple, but we can have it where basically it just reads high, low, We can have it where it would read, say, high, medium. It could have up to, I think it's 8 or 10 different points. And we also have one that's just continuous reading. So anywhere along the chain or anywhere along the rod, it's reading where the level is. So where you ask, where is this a benefit? Mainly two applications you're really going to see a benefit with something of this. Is going to be your pharmaceutical and your brewery industry, which I know we haven't gotten much into, but again, most all of these things can go into the brewery industry. You're just, where does the real benefit of some of the stuff? This is a huge benefit for the brewery industry because the reasoning is measuring level is extremely difficult on things that have foam and things. This is great so that this actually reads on the top of the liquid level. This sits on the top of the liquid and actually doesn't sit on the foam. So it gives you an exact reading for, say, the brewery industry. Also in pharmaceutical industry where they have foamy product. So this is a great device. The downfall of this device is we can only do it typically to about 18 to 20 feet, which is still pretty big, but it's very difficult to get something that large first transported somewhere because it comes together, and then also to get it into the tank. So, this device has some limitations. That's why you could never look at really using it on, say, a silo or something. It's more of a process tank type thing. So, with that, we've kind of gone through a pretty basis of what the food and pharma type things are. I notice you guys haven't any questions at this point. There is a little bit of time that we've added to the end of this. I understand that if you guys would like to ask some questions, please feel free to send some in, and I'll be glad to answer them while I'm here. Or if there's a product that you see that you would like me to just go a little bit more in depth into, or actually talk about again, please send it over to me, or please ask it, and I can go back in.
We'd like to thank Clay for his time and his expertise with us today. Hopefully you were able to get some good information from what he's shown you today, and that will hopefully drive some new business or pick up some old business. We'd like to thank you also for being with us today. One thing I was going to throw out at you is real quickly is we have just added a new feature that we can provide to you, our customers, and that is a laser engraver. And I don't know if you can tell from this picture or not, but we have the capabilities of engraving stainless steel tags for you that you can put all kinds of pertinent information for your customers that normally would go on some other type of a tag. We've in the past been able to just do some light engraving for you, but this new capability opens that up tremendously. We can also look at engraving directly onto your devices if that is something that you may need as well. If you have any questions about that or any potential ideas, let us know and we'll talk to you about what we can do for you in that realm. Also, if there are any questions you have or some things that we might not have covered today, some specific items, products that you were hoping to see or you thought about during the course of this webinar, let us know. Just send us an email and we will look into it and get you some information back and talk to you and have somebody, if need be, get in touch with you and discuss it. If there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and wind this up and give you a chance to go get something to drink, take a bathroom break before you get back to your afternoon. We again thank you for being with us today and hope this is just the first of many to come of this type of informative sessions. Thanks again and have a great upcoming 4th of July holiday as well. Thank you.